As decided by my Patreon supporters, this month's Patreon's Choice. Hello my friends, welcome back to another episode of Blackmagic Craft. This is an exciting episode for me, and the reason for that is that the subject of this tutorial was decided by my generous supporters on Patreon. One reality of this channel growing in popularity is that it is no longer realistically feasible for me to even entertain the idea of trying to make videos for all of the things that people request in the comments. But I still want to make videos that you guys really want to see that I might not think of necessarily. So as a reward to my Patreon supporters, I make a monthly poll where they can vote in to decide what I'm gonna make a tutorial on. And at higher levels of pledges, supporters can actually submit their own topics to these polls, and on another higher level, can even actually just like straight up decide, Jeremy, you're gonna make a video about this. And as long as it's reasonable and on topic, I will do it. If there's something you really wanna see me make, the only way you're probably gonna actually make that happen is if you head over to Patreon and support Blackmagic Craft, which I kind of need you guys to do if possible, because that makes the channel a real thing that continues. Anyway, that is how you can put your requests in. But this episode is the Patreon supporters' choice. In the last poll, the #1 most requested topic was jungle tiles. So today I am going to show you how to make a set of overgrown jungle ruins tiles. It took me a while to get the technique that I wanted down for this tutorial because I wanted something that really evoked a sense of jungle temple tiles, you know, inspired by the Aztecs and the Mayans and even the temples in Cambodia. But there was no real stone pattern I could pull from any of those that was, you know, easy to maintain and wasn't just a basic, you know, European style stonework. So I finally came up with something that I think looks pretty interesting and is not that hard to do, and I think you're gonna like it. These tiles are perfect if you are running some kind of session in a jungle, or if you picked up Tales from Yawning Portal and are running the hidden shrine of Tamoachin. Tamoachin? How do you say it? That's such a, couldn't they just called it the Shrine of George? And if you want to be sure that you are using the right tools, materials, whatever for this project, you can head over to blackmagiccraft.ca, and there I have my essential equipment store. And through there you can purchase all the stuff that I use on this channel and in these builds. Those purchases through my affiliate store also help support the channel financially, so do your shopping through those links. Anyways, that's enough blithering and blabbering and call to action stuff. Let's just go make a set of cool jungle ruin tiles. So like every other tile I have built on this channel, I'm going to start with a 3" by 3" square of 1/2 inch thick XPS foam. Something I recommend doing if you've picked up a Proxon table is when you have some free time, just cut up a big batch of these blank tiles. The other night, in about, I don't know, 10 minutes, made about 20 or so of these just to put aside and have on hand so that when I want to build a tile, this step is already out of the way. On these tiles, I want to preserve a 1" grid. So I'm going to start by etching in the 1" grid on this, and instead of using the knife and pen technique, I'm gonna cut down on some time and do it with the hot wire. So here I'm going to set my fence at exactly 1". Turn it on. I'm going to set the temperature to 2 to test this out, and I'm just gonna use a piece of scrap here to test how deep this is burning at this temperature. I want it to be not a huge thick line, because if it's too hot, then it melts a really wide line. So for me, for right now, on a 2 is about right. You may have to adjust depending on your table. There's probably some variance. And I've even noticed that after doing a big batch, sometimes the temperature fluctuates and you may want to change it. Have it set at a low heat, standing my tile vertically and square to the floor. and I'm just going to tap in the line just like I did on the wood tiles, rotate the tile 90 degrees, tap it again, rotate it 90 degrees, tap it again, and last one, boom, and I'm done. Got a 1-inch grid. You can see how fast that is. Make a big batch of these tiles. I usually start out with a dozen when I'm making new tiles, and you can at least get this step down really quickly. I also want to do a line across the side here so that I can separate the surface stone from the side stone. So this I'm just gonna eyeball. It doesn't really matter. Pick a thickness, and I'm gonna do the same. I'm just gonna tap, rotate, tap, rotate, tap, rotate. And on the last one, I'm gonna try to make sure that my two lines really line up. Call it done. The one flaw with this Proxon table is that this fence is a little bit, it's not super secure. So when you're doing these, you do wanna keep some pressure on the fence. And the other problem is that it's fairly low. So when you're doing upright cuts like this, you have to be careful not to tilt your piece. That being said, you can make your own custom higher fence. You can also order Gerard Boom from shiftinglines.com makes a custom full height fence that's great for this application. But with a little bit of care, you can do it with the factory fence, as I tend to do myself. Okay, let's go over to the table and start putting on some brickwork. For these tiles, I wanted something that was a little bit more intricate and interesting than just the 1-inch bricks. So I decided to create a little stone pattern within the brick, and it'll just make it look a little bit more interesting. To do this, I'm gonna use the knife and pen method, where I cut a line and then trace it back with the pen to make a kind of V-shaped groove. And I do this first with the knife and then with the pen. But if I'm doing this pattern with a knife, you guys aren't gonna be able to see it on screen very well. So I am gonna do it with the pen first, but keep in mind, you can absolutely, as long as you're confident in your layout, just go directly with the knife first to save some time. Essentially, the way I break it down into a repetitive task so I can do a bunch that stay similar is that I am going to do cross, like center lines on every second tile in the same direction. You know what? And I'm actually gonna do this, I think, with a marker so you can see it a little bit better. Center of every second tile in the same direction. I'm gonna turn it 90 degrees and do the same thing in the opposite direction. And this will just give me a bit of a starting point for a pattern. Now I'm gonna start breaking up these halves, and I didn't make a set kind of rule system for this. I just started splitting them and trying to keep it sort of random, but sort of pattern. It's a difficult thing, you know, to kind of explain. But the big thing is that I am intentionally not making all of these lines perfect right angles. I'm allowing them to be slightly angled to make things, I don't know, a bit more, you know, unusual. So it doesn't look like the typical European stonework we often see in fantasy terrain. So there I've kind of now split these in random spots. And then I'm gonna break some of these down further, splitting some of them in half. And my big rule with this that I seem to, you know, kind of give myself is to try to not have lines on one tile directly hit lines on another. Kind of offset them, split them in different places. And then from this point here, you can go back in and start splitting a few even further if you would like. But that's basically it. Just kind of don't think about it too much. just kind of go. I'm gonna do it with a knife, but like I said, this would be actually the first way I would do it. I would just do it directly freehand with a knife. And as always, continue the grooves down the side of the tile as well, but I'm only going to do it up until this little line here that separates the surface tile from the base tile. And on the sides, I want a stone pattern that, you know, is just a bunch of angled pieces, kind of like this. So it looks like it's sitting on some heavy blocks. Again, don't worry too much about it, don't overthink it, and kind of intentionally make those lines not straight. And again, cut these grooves with the X-Acto as well. And once all your lines are cut with the X-Acto, you can go in and use a ballpoint pen to bevel them. Do the hot wire lines as well, and then start tracing around the stonework. Now here, you can be pretty aggressive with this, and don't worry about breaking or chipping the edge of some of these stones. In fact, I encourage you to do so and actually break some of the corners and rip out some chunks or small stones, because these we want to have a worn out, ruined look. Do not be careful. Go ahead and be a little careless and aggressive with your pen. One thing you want to keep in mind is that when you are doing this, any little pieces that break off, make sure you fully remove them so you don't have little floating chunks left in the grooves. Get them all out of there. And of course, whatever you do on the top surface, mimic on the sides. And once all the line work is done being cut and beveled, I'm going to take the old tinfoil ball and start giving this some texture. And one thing that helps in the look is beveling these edges a bit, and you don't even need to sand it. You can just take your tinfoil ball and kind of just aggressively run it across any sharp factory edges just to break them and round them a bit. Same with these corners. Again, you're making tiles that want to look very well worn, so you can be quite aggressive with this. So aggressive that it flies across the room. Of course, don't forget the edges. I like to just stand it on edge and roll right across with the tinfoil ball. And once this thing is looking well abused, it is time to get it ready for paint. And as I do with all of my foam tiles and terrain, I'm gonna give this thing a coat in black Mod Podge. It's Mod Podge with black paint mixed in. If you have any questions or concerns about this stage of the process, watch my video about the Blackmagic base coat, because I cover this in detail. So let's skip ahead to when my coating is dry. Now that the Mod Podge is dry, it's time to move on to painting. And when I made my set of these tiles, I wanted them to have a little bit more of an interesting, more dynamic paint job than my basic dungeon tiles. I went through a little bit more effort on the paint here, and I'm going to show you what I did. Now, if you look at these tiles, they are gray essentially, but they are different than the basic dungeon ones. They have a lot more variance in the color, and while they did end up gray, they ended up there in a very kind of roundabout way that created a much more natural looking paint job. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to paint out the tile in a very earthy beige sort of color palette. I'm going to start with a tan, and then this kind of light suede, and then highlight with vanilla. So rather than doing the, you know, two tones of gray, it's more of a two tones of beige. Once I have these on, they are going to have a really kind of desert stone look to them. You can actually take this paint job and apply it to terrain for a kind of like desert environment, but I am then going to do some washes on it that's going to bring it back to gray, except with a lot more interesting undertones. So you can actually use this technique in different ways. And also if you want to just take these tiles and paint them out in just a two-tone gray, that's fine. I just wanted my set of these to be a little bit more dynamic looking, and I want to show you that there's many different ways to end up with gray, and there's a lot of interesting options when you're painting. So anyways, the first thing that I'm going to do is paint out the entire piece in this tan. This is Craftsmart tan. It's a very kind of, it's like a gray beige, has a nice natural stone look to it. And I'm going to completely paint the whole piece. And as I usually do, I try to actually get in all the nooks and crannies and then let the washes actually bring back out the black lines. And once you have the whole thing covered, go around to any of these big deep divots and kind of brush out the excess paint that might be sitting in there, because you want this piece to be pretty much fully dried before moving on to the next highlight color. And if you have these pools of paint in these low spots, it's going to take a lot longer to dry. So now the first layer of tan is dry, so we're going to move on to a lighter shade. This is Suede by Craftsmart, and same way I do on the basic dungeon tiles, I am just going to give this a dry brush highlight with this lighter tone. And if you are having trouble with your dry brushing, check out the basics episode I did where I cover how to do that. But basically, lighter tone, gonna go around and do a pretty full coverage highlight here. Get quite a bit of coverage. And you gotta keep in mind that if you follow my method here exactly and do the same dark wash on it that I'm gonna do, that this is going to change drastically with the wash. So you really want to overdo it with your highlights on this and get it to a point where it is way too bright, especially when we move on to the next step with this here, with the vanilla. But picking up all these little raised bits from the tinfoil texture. And you can see here already you have a pretty nice looking sandstone type tile that, like I said, would be great for, you know, a Middle Eastern desert kind of environment. If I wanted to keep it with this kind of look, I would probably just do a kind of light brown wash to get in all the crevices rather than the black that I'm going to do. You want to let that dry for a little while and then break out your vanilla or off-white of some kind. And here, again, I'm gonna do more of this than I normally would if I wasn't gonna give this a dark wash that will drastically change it. So it's gonna go, still going light. You wanna only hit the highest points with this, but not worried about making this brighter than I would want. Now, when this paint is thoroughly dry, we can move on to the wash stage. And it's important that this is totally dry before doing it. If you're impatient, break out the hairdryer and speed up the drying process, but don't do this until it is dry. So here I have a basic black wash that I cover in the black wash episode. It's the same exact batch that I used on my wood tiles that I've saved in this bottle here. It's a black wash with a bit of brown mixed in as well. And just give it a shake because it's been sitting for a while. And I'm gonna pour a bunch into this Tupperware here, enough that I can completely submerge this tile. And like I said, if you're going for a kind of deserty sort of sandstone look, maybe don't go with the black wash, go with a light brown wash. But I wanna bring this back into the gray territory, and I just want all of these beiges to be kind of undertones in the gray. So take the tiles, dip, lift, pour off excess, Sometimes you want to dip again just to be sure. And try to let that excess come off, and then let that sit for a while. So now my wash is pretty much dry. Leave it as long as possible, but I'm in a hurry here, so there's still some wash in the crevices that's wet, but that's okay for demonstration purposes. Before moving on to the next step, I want to give you a word of caution or advice. When you are doing a set of tiles like this, and it involves several stages of paint, I highly recommend that you carve and get ready as many tiles as you possibly can before moving on to paint and trying to paint out a very large batch, hopefully your entire batch that you'll ever need in one go. And the reason I say that is because when you are doing this type of paint job, there are a lot of variables, and if you paint them in separate sessions, even if you're following the same steps, they're gonna end up looking slightly different. Like I did my set last night, and today I'm making this one for you guys to see, and the paint job is not identical. It's close, and if you have a whole bunch and you kind of mix them all up, it probably won't matter. But if you really want your set to kind of blend and look consistent, I recommend painting as many at once as you can. So that being said, it is time to dress up this tile with a bit of greenery to give it a kind of overgrown look, like it's been sitting in the jungle for years and all sorts of plants have sprouted from the cracks and crevices. So to do that, I'm going to be using two different items. To do some kind of shrubbery, I am using some Woodland Scenics coarse turf. This is a chunky kind of foam, and for more kind of moss and light small plant life, I'm going to be using this Woodland Scenics fine turf, and the color on this one is green grass. I will try to remember to put links to some of this stuff on my Amazon affiliate store so that you can get the right thing. But essentially use any type of flocking you can get your hands on. The coarse turf stuff doesn't really matter. You can use anything that can represent kind of chunkier plants. But for the fine kind of mossy type plant, you are going to want the finest turf you can get your hands on. And if you're making homemade flocking out of like sawdust or pencil shavings or tea or whatever you have, it may not be fine enough for this application, and you might want to actually purchase some really fine turf. It is very important, at least in my mind, that when you're doing this, you preserve the flatness of the tile. You don't want a bunch of bumpy things that when you stand other terrain on top or minis, it kind of makes them all crooked and cockeyed. You want to have the look of overgrown, but you want it to stay flat. So first I'm going to go with the coarse turf, and I'm going to attach it into some of these big chunks. See, this is where these big chunks come in handy because it will allow me to embed a chunk of this coarse turf into the tile and give it a great look, but not create a huge bump. So for this, I am going to attach it with Aleene's tacky glue. You don't need much. Well, you might need lots if you're doing lots of tiles at once. And essentially all you want to do is grab a chunk of turf, dip it in the tacky glue, pick it up, and stick it right into one of these voids. And the stuff dries clear, so you don't have to worry about getting it, onto stuff and leaving it exposed. And go through and just wherever you got a big kind of missing piece of stone, put a chunk of turf. And like I said, although it might look great if you have this big bushy plant sticking up, for playability, it's really important that these stay flat. So you actually want to push them down flat. So on a tile like this, having 4 or 5 points where there's these kind of coarse turf, I think is enough. Now I'm going to do the moss. So I have in here white, it's PVA glue in a 50-50 water mix. So it's very, very watery. Going to put some in a little container. And you want this to be the consistency of, you know, really thin milk. And just go and dab some on in a few spots, kind of working outward from where you put some of this coarse turf, and let it flow into the cracks so that when you put your turf down, it looks like plant life is growing in the cracks. So once you have some spread out like that, right away just go and shake on some fine flocking and overdo it. Put too much on at first and let it sit for a second, and then all you got to do is tap off the excess and you're done. And of course, this extra flocking that you shook off, you can pour right back into your container. So you actually use very little of it at a time. And that's why some people think that this stuff might be kind of expensive, but one of these tubs will probably last you your entire crafting career, so to speak. And what I like to do is, if I'm using a few different colors at once and mixing it all up and you get this blend, I save that mix and put it into a separate container for a pre-mixed blend of turf. So now you just gotta let this sit and let the glue dry. Now, one last fun bit of decoration here. To really give these that cool overgrown jungle look, you need to find some plastic decorative plants. You can buy these at places like Michael's or even the dollar store, all sorts of craft stores, probably even Walmart. It's really easy to find little plastic plants, but the trick is you have to find ones that have individual branches with very small leaves. That's the trick. Look for something that has very small, tiny leaves on individual branches of the stem, and you're going to want to go and cut out a couple of these for each tile. To attach them, I'm actually just going to use regular super glue, and it's important that your PVA glue that you used on this stuff here is pretty dry, because super glue and PVA don't really play well together. They mix in an interesting kind of way. You don't want it happening on these tiles, because what it can do is turn into a weird bubbly white mess. And I found the easiest way to attach these is actually just to pour out a little puddle of super glue onto a work surface, and then grab a little piece of plastic plant here and dip the whole thing into the super glue. Don't worry about getting on your tweezers, and get it off after. And then take it and find a place in one of those bigger tufts and stick it in so it looks like it's growing out from underneath it. And what you want to do, this takes a little bit of patience. You want to, as the super glue is setting up, hold it in place so that the plastic plant is as flat as possible onto the tile. Because again, we don't want to be creating bumps that will make minis kind of wobble on them. So there, it doesn't take that long. Just be careful you don't glue your tweezers right to the fern. Find another one, and this is up to you how much you want to put on. When I did my set of tiles, I kind of went between 2 to 4 of these per tile, some with more, some with less. And just hold it in place till the glue sets up. See, it doesn't take very long. Here, let's do a third one. You can get pretty interesting with this depending on what plants you have available. These are ones that I just already had from another project. If you can find a few different varieties, that would be ideal. And again, the most important thing is to preserve the flatness of the tile, because playability is more important than anything else. And that's it. You have a tile that looks weathered and overgrown. And to complete the project, I give all of these tiles a spray of Minwax fast drying polyurethane. I use the clear satin variety. Always remember to spray this stuff outside or in a well-ventilated area, and try to spray from at least about 12 inches away and give light passes. You want to have a heavy coating in the end of this stuff and a total coverage, but do it in light, gentle passes and you should be fine. All right, now you have all the knowledge and techniques down to make your own set. And again, if you want to get any of the tools or supplies that I used in this tutorial, head over to blackmagiccraft.ca, and there you can find links to all the stuff that I recommend for you. Of course, if you found this video useful, hit that like button, drop me a comment below, and if you aren't already a subscriber, just hit the button. I put out new episodes every Friday. It's a lot of work to make that happen, so I would love it if you subscribed. And of course, I gotta say it as usual, if you really love this channel and you really want to help it stay afloat, the best way you can do that is by supporting Blackmagic Craft on Patreon. There's a lot of cool rewards for the people that do, and it is the best way to help keep this channel growing. So until I see you guys again next week, happy crafting.